Mark, ruling Monday, an Oklahoma judge found Johnson & Johnson guilty of helping to fuel the state's opioid crisis. The company was ordered to pay over $500 million to help address the drug epidemic in Oklahoma. It's the first major pharmaceutical company being held accountable for its role in the widespread use of prescription painkillers. The company says it will appeal the judge's decision. However, victims of the crisis say they will continue to fight. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates opioids claimed the lives of 47,000 Americans in 2017 alone. Omar Villafranca has the details from Norman, Oklahoma.
I'm entering an abatement plan that consists of costs totaling $572,102,028.
Judge Thad Balkman concluded the state-approved pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson and its subsidiary Janssen caused a public health emergency in Oklahoma. State Attorney General Michael Hunter.
When opioid sales in Oklahoma began to skyrocket, the death toll from unintentional prescription drug-related overdoses mounted, leaving in its wake broken homes, families, and communities.
The state estimates the opioid epidemic has killed some 6,000 Oklahomans in 19 years. In 2017, they sued Johnson & Johnson, Purdue Pharma, and Teva Pharmaceuticals for aggressively marketing opioids to doctors while significantly downplaying the addiction risks. Teva and Purdue settled for more than $300 million. Johnson & Johnson vows to appeal.
But Johnson & Johnson did not cause the opioid abuse crisis here in Oklahoma or anywhere in this country.
Tanya Radcliffe, a foster mother, testified for the plaintiffs about caring for children born addicted to opioids.
What does your idea of justice look like?
I think we have to look at saving lives. You know, the lives that have been lost already. Was that for nothing?
Omar Villafranca joins me now from Norman, Oklahoma. Omar, many states have been affected by the opioid crisis. Separate lawsuits were recently filed in Ohio and West Virginia against Johnson & Johnson and Teva Pharmaceuticals. What does this verdict mean for other cases across the country?
Well, two things, Elaine. One, it kind of leaves a blueprint for these other states to try to follow, basically when it comes to their cases against these pharmaceutical companies. As a matter of fact, the Attorney General and some of the counsel that was around the Attorney General were saying this is something that they're going to be sharing, and they're going to be publishing their work to kind of let the other states know how it's done. It also tells the pharmaceutical companies they can settle, but that they can also have a verdict rendered against them, like what we saw in this case. Now, keep in mind, Teva Pharmaceuticals and Purdue settled for about $300 million. Didn't have any blame. They didn't take any blame, but they settled for roughly $300 million. J&J wanted to go to court, went to court, and they lost this first round for the tune of more than $500 million. So the question is this going to force some pharmaceutical companies to settle? We're going to have to see.
Well, Omar, what can you tell us about the strategy Oklahoma state attorneys used to hold this corporation, Johnson & Johnson, accountable?
It's called the public nuisance argument, and it may sound familiar. Something similar was used when states were going against big tobacco in North Carolina. That was obviously a giant rendering there of a verdict. It's a little different. Now, public nuisance has been tried in other states and lost because there was the word property written into the law. Apparently here in Oklahoma, that law does not have the word property in it. And based on the judge's ruling, ruled in favor of the state and the plaintiff in this case. So, like I said, that might be a blueprint for other states, Ohio and West Virginia, and other states ready to file suits. This may be the way to go, but this is going to be appealed. Johnson & Johnson already said they're going to appeal this to a higher court, so we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, Oklahoma's attorneys said that they want this money to be used to help the state deal with the opioid crisis. What are the specifics of how this money will be used?
There's no specifics exactly yet. The judge was giving some suggestions because I think the legislature, if this in fact does eventually get paid, the legislature is going to have to decide how that money is spent. They're talking about programs to help people get off dependency, clean up. The state of Oklahoma is saying that the opioid epidemic is costing them roughly $1 billion a year. Everything from police work to to crime, to damage, to what do you do with kids. We talked to one woman who has foster kids, and 3 of them were born addicted to drugs, to opioids, and that's something that, of course, she says it's not only the user, but there's kind of residual effects. So how this money exactly is going to be tallied out, we're not sure. We understand it. We think it's going to be one lump payment at that point, but how they're going to spend it, not sure yet.
And Omar, you touched on this. Johnson & Johnson issued a statement saying it plans to appeal the judge's decision. What happens next? Is this expected to go to the Oklahoma Supreme Court?
It's going to skip the civil courts, and they're expecting to appeal it to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Now, exactly when yet? Obviously, this is just fresh. We don't have any timetables yet. Johnson & Johnson attorneys are telling us that they are getting ready. They are ready to continue this fight. When asked if they were ready to take this to the federal level, they didn't want to go that far yet because they want to see what they can do still on the state level. But regardless, other states that are suing drug companies are watching this. Not only are they going to watch this particular trial and see what arguments were made, they're going to watch the appeals process and see if there's a blueprint for success for them.
So there is another big trial coming up in Ohio this fall against several pharmaceutical companies. What are the details there?
From what we understand, this is kind of a consolidated case. There was roughly more than 2,000 different suits that were filed, and instead of having 2,000 trials or 2,000 settlements, they basically combined them into kind of one big one that's scheduled to get started in October. Now, whether it's going to proceed the way this Oklahoma trial did, we're going to have to wait and see. But after this, a lot of us are trying to see if there's going to be anybody willing to come to the table for negotiations. Is there going to be any settlements? As we mentioned, the state of Oklahoma asked for $17.2 billion, but they only got $572 million. But the Oklahoma AG said they're fine with that. That's fine. At this point, they just wanted to hold the drug manufacturers accountable. And in this round of the court game, they won.
All right, Omar Villafranca for us. Omar, thank you.